We have Ryan Hana from the Wing Wheel Podcast. How you feeling after last night's game winner?
I think I was up for about 6 hours later than I should have been. I was so pumped up. Heard the LCA crowd from my house, so pretty good.
Hockey Town's back, baby.
Hockey Town is back.
The boys are back, baby. You got the Red Wings in the playoffs this year?
I'm like, I know I'm risking it by saying it, but the way this team is playing right now, man, I think they're in the driver's seat. I'm not making any late April plans for sure.
I love it. And, going off of that, I know I might be getting a little in front of myself here, but we got to ink Patrick Kane, right? I know obviously you got to get the Mo deal, you got to get the Raymond deal, even guys like Sprong and Perron that you're looking to possibly extend, but like Patrick Kane needs to stay in the winged wheel for at least another year. Am I wrong with that?
Yeah, you're completely right. I think we expected when Patrick Kane came in that it would be a zero risk maneuver. Like worst case that his hips just don't hold up after the procedure and he ends up like most other guys who've had that procedure and it's all a wash. But we said if he comes back and if this new procedure goes really well and you get Patrick Kane better than he was in previous seasons, then that's a huge win. And how he's playing right now surpassed even that. He's a difference maker on the ice. He commands a kind of space and respect from defenders that you haven't seen since the Red Wings have had Pavel Datsyuk, really. This guy changes the team's dynamic. You have to keep him. So if you can extend him for a year or two, I think the ball's in Kane's court. I think Detroit would absolutely love to do that.
What's that price tag look like?
It's hard to say. There's not really a lot of comparables for this situation. Like a lot more expensive now than when they first signed him. I'll tell you that because he's proven himself. So, I'd say maybe a couple of years, plus or minus a year. I could see like $5 to $6.5 million, maybe. Kane could potentially ask for a lot more and probably get it from a team on like a short-term basis. But this does seem to be a really good fit, and he's made a ton of money in his life. So. I do see this being potentially a situation where the two parties work with each other.
Yeah, I just think he likes it here. You know the relationship he's got with DeBrincat. He's forming a very good relationship with Larkin and Seider. You could see it on the ice, the chemistry those guys have together. And I said 2 for 10. I would love that if we could get him for 2 for 10. But
yeah, that would be a steal.
Looking at another guy on this team that some people might have worries about going deeper and deeper into the season is Alex Lyon. He's been playing absolutely lights out, but he's never had this kind of load as a legitimate number one goaltender, especially going into the playoffs. I know he helped them back into the playoffs last year, but are you worried about him, kind of getting worn down after getting all these starts that he's going to be seeing for the rest of the season?
Yeah, there's no real way to cut around that. Like, it's a big risk, and it's not just because he's never done it. It's because it's a big risk, really, in the modern NHL to do this with any goalie. You've seen the formula for a winning team and a contending team is to have a number one guy who's playing lights out, and you don't make him play 60, 65 plus games, or the equivalent over a stretch of time here. So it's an advantage that Lyon didn't play a lot at the start of the season. That tips in their favor, but it really would help if they could get, Ville Husso healthy, which is just not the case right now, or if they can depend on James Reimer more than they really can at the moment. So you're right to be concerned. I think it's a risk, but I think really Detroit doesn't have any other path to go other than to play Lyon the majority of the games, especially as they get more important down the stretch here.
Definitely. And I looked at this team as, obviously they're, by the numbers, the deepest team in the NHL. They have the most players with double-digit goals scored in 12. This is one of the deepest Red Wings teams I've seen since probably 2011 or around there, early 2010s. When you look at the line combinations, you saw at the end of the game last night, they were throwing, DeBrincat, Larkin, and Kane out there. What is your favorite number one line when it comes down to it? Who would you like to see on that first line?
That's a funny question because you say DeBrincat, Larkin, Kane, or Larkin, Raymond, Kane, or Larkin, Raymond, DeBrincat, whatever you want to say, and it really just it never really works out for the Red Wings the way you draw it up on paper. They gel at different points. I like DeBrincat, Larkin, Kane. I think anytime you can get Kane with DeBrincat making that connection whenever you can, that's probably good. DeBrincat needs to be scoring a little bit more consistently, so if you can encourage that, great. But Lucas Raymond has also been, maybe even underappreciated, but having one hell of a season at 21 years old so far this year. Having him on the top line is probably where he deserves to be. That top six, really, you add in one more kind of true top six caliber player, and you're looking at any kind of combination that'll work for you.
Ryan, you talk about adding in another top six player. Do you have any expectations of Stevie Y at the deadline coming up here in March?
I think he's active. From what I understand, there's, you're not in the position that Steve Yzerman's in without trying to improve the team. And it's at all positions, right? Like the Red Wings can add a top six player. There have been suggestions about, Jake Gensel out there. He would be a fit, but that would need an extension. But, do you really want to extend Jake Gensel, who will be 30 next season, for a max term? Probably not. So what does that look like? They've been linked to Vetrano as well. And then on defense, it's really been Seider and Wallman who've been carrying the toughest minutes on this team. And they've been doing a good job, but it's a thankless task, and you're going to need a little bit more support. So if Yzerman can make a move to add a defenseman that isn't necessarily a rental, or maybe not most likely a rental, that would help. But those moves are harder to pull off. If you want to peel away Jacob Chychrun, you want to peel away Noah Hannafin, that's going to take some doing with an extension for Hannafin or more of a price tag for Chychrun. So I think Yzerman's knocking on a lot of doors, but what actually transpires, it really just depends on what the market is looking like. I do wonder, though, if he's not going to use this deadline to offload a defensive contract to make room on this team, though, because there's a little bit of a logjam there, and there's kind of a bottom three defensemen in Petrie, Hall, and Mata that aren't necessarily carrying a load in terms of performance.
Hey, Ryan, Nick in the sound booth here. Love what you guys do at the Winged Wheel. Congratulations on the success. Talk about knocking on the door here. We have one of the top prospects in the whole entire NHL pipeline, and his name is Simon Edvinsson. And we talk about defensive help for this team. Could you see that actually being the addition that this team makes, bringing up a guy like Simon Edvinsson?
Earlier this year, Nick, I would have said yeah, for sure. But down the stretch at the deadline, it just doesn't really fit with the Red Wings' MO in terms of what I'd say they'd want to be doing. It's definitely a possibility, and let's say injuries mean it has to happen that way. Like, they'll go to that well and they'll make do. But at the end of the day, they'll view Simon Edvinsson as a guy who's not, an NHL regular, and it's really hard to bring those guys into the mix during a playoff push and ask them to carry a big load of minutes or a really important role. So I personally, in my opinion, I think Simon Edvinsson can do it with some success, or at least the same amount that you've been seeing with Detroit's, 5th, 6th, 7th defenseman. But I'd be a little surprised if that's the direction the Red Wings went, unless like an injury or something forced their hand.
Stevie Y has been kind of, I don't want to say frugal, but calculated when it comes to like re-signing their own. You have our guy Seider coming up here, as well as Raymond. What type of contracts do you expect those guys to get?
Well, the question first is going to be term, right? The going kind of procedure, if you're a GM in Detroit's situation, is you sign those guys for as long as you can. That's just the way the NHL is going. The longer you can lock in your best young players, the better it is, the more efficient it is on the cap. That said, these players also know that, right? So I would not be surprised if Lucas Raymond is pushing for a bridge deal, maybe short to mid-term. Mo Seider the same. It's going to be hard to justify Mo Seider's number, much under 9, if at all under 9. And, Lucas Raymond might have been looking at Matt Boldy's previous contract as a comparable, and depending on how he finishes up the season, the ask might be even higher, right? So it's less of a question about the cap hit. Of course, it's important, but the cap hit's really going to be a product of the term that they go into that meeting with. So if they're flexible on term and they're willing to take 8 years, 7-8 years, then that's really the best case situation for Detroit. But I think if you see them both take a bridge, that puts the team in a difficult position in a few years when they come up, and they'll be better players then. They'll have to really pay at that point.
Yeah, I just remember the cover of the Detroit News when Hank signed his contract, and it was Forever Z when he signed that 14-year deal or whatever it was. That was just insane. And I hope they can get a deal done with both of those guys long term. But speaking of the shorter term guys, the shorter term deals that we see on this team, because Nick spoke about Evanson in the pipeline. That forward pipeline is also pop. I do think Berger's gets, if they make a move, obviously I think Bergeron's going to be the guy that gets shipped out of that pipeline. But still, you have so many great forwards ready to come up. What do you do with guys like Sprong and like David Perron that are veteran, important pieces to this team, but coming up on contract years?
Yeah, it's hard to look at, Daniel Sprong and say this guy has scored, 15 goals right now with the minutes that he's getting. He doesn't play a lot of minutes. For someone to have that efficient of a scoring touch, the Red Wings, you don't have to look too far back to see when they were a team that couldn't score. So you don't really want to give that up. He'll command a bigger price tag, so I think what he goes for in free agency will probably dictate whether or not the Red Wings can keep him. And with Perron, I've seen competing narratives. He's a big presence in the room, and he's a really important guy in that locker room. He was a big part of the culture change in Detroit. But he's getting up there, so do you want to keep him or do you want to trade him while he still has value? I've seen kind of both things suggested. I've heard both things suggested. I think the Red Wings, it's been reported by Emily Kaplan, are leaning more towards keeping him right now. And you're right, that does create a bit of a logjam. So, not every player that they want to keep on contract they'll be able to keep, and not every prospect they have is going to graduate to the team at the same time. I think ideally Marco Kasper is making a push next season for the team. Depends on the camp he has. Carter Mazur, I would not be surprised to see that guy really impress in camp. He got injured in the offseason this year, which kind of took away his opportunity. And Nate Danielson, this previous preseason, I thought you could have had him on the team and been fine.
Yeah, it was
no big deal to kind of send him back to the CHL. Yeah, so they're going to have some decisions to make, but the way the Red Wings operate is if they have a good player, they'll try to keep the good player or make use of him. And I think that's going to inform on what kind of space is available for the rookies.
And finally, Ryan, before we let you go and before you shout out where people can hear from you, this is something that's hit me hard because I did speak ill of this man in the beginning of the season and going forward.
Big game Benny.
But the playoff assassin, or the overtime assassin, Ben Sherratt, has been one of the best players on the ice for the Red Wings the past couple games. I thought in Calgary he played lights out in that obviously blowout victory. He had the overtime winner in Seattle, and now he's got the secondary helper on Kane's winner in overtime. Where's this coming? What is this renaissance of Ben Sherratt's career, and how important is that for your third shift D-man to be playing this well?
Dog.
Look, full credit to OT Benny. That is a renaissance is right. I'll be very upfront. I was not a fan of Sherratt's game last season. I was not a fan of the contract. I thought, it was turning out really poorly, really quickly. And Ben Sherratt has taken advantage of a difference in the way the Red Wings are deploying him and having a way, way better season. He and his family also went through an incredibly, incredibly tough offseason, and sincere condolences to them on the loss of their father. And that had obviously it must have had a big impact. And for him to be able to go through that and return to the ice and have the kind of season he has, it's really you can't do anything but take your hat off for Ben Sherratt and what he's been able to do on the ice. Again, I think the Red Wings are deploying him differently in a way that makes a lot more sense for his role. And he's also stepped his game up in a big way to the point where, he's one of the Red Wings' top 4 defensemen and absolutely, an important part of this D-core. The Red Wings don't have the kind of success they've had without Ben Sherratt stepping it up this year.
I agree. He's been lights out. It's been awesome. And we do have a couple comments in the chat asking about your Patreon member of the Wing Wheel podcast who snuck the octopus onto the ice in Calgary, threw it out there, got arrested, and then hit big at the casino. Can you give us a quick recap of what went on there?
Yeah, so, I was covering the game, and I saw the octopus hit the ice, which was awesome anytime you see, Hockey Town make their impact on the road. And then in our Winged Wheel podcast Patreon Discord, a bunch of people pinged me. They were like, hey, this is, so-and-so. He goes by D-Boss Snip Show. And I looked in the Discord, and he had sent all of the preparation. He was marinating the octopus, took videos. He had it saran wrapped to his chest. He actually was DMing in the Discord from the back of the police van. It was hysterical.
Oh, that's
he
amazing.
Sent a picture of the ticket, and then he went out to the casino and won $2,000 at the casino right after. And
Legend.
we wanted to help him out with the ticket, with the fine. We wanted to, other people wanted to help him with the fine as well. And he's like, nope, just donate it all to the Jamie Daniels Foundation through Wings Money on the Board. And we posted that link. So that guy is just a champion through and through, man.
Yeah,
That is an insane story.
That's amazing.
That is actually a crazy story.
Yeah.
Going to the casino and hitting big afterwards.
It's so funny.
Shout out to the Jamie Daniels Foundation as well. We've had Ken Daniels on a couple times and he talked about that. But Ryan, we appreciate you,
that, yeah.
as always, joining the show. Before we let you go, sorry for keeping you on too long. Make sure you let our listeners know where they can get what you guys got for this Red Wings playoff push.
Yeah, always happy to jump on. Thanks for having me, guys. So, again, I'm one of the hosts of the Winged Wheel podcast. If you go to wingedwheelpodcast.com, you can find all of our episodes, all the ways to listen. We're on YouTube. Wherever you get your podcast, just look us up. We're the biggest Red Wings podcast in the air. We post twice a week, Sundays and then midweek. And, we're excited for this hopeful playoff push here. So, and we also have Wind Wheel Podcast Night at the LCA, where we're going to host a live episode of the podcast at Little Caesars Arena before the Red Wings game, featuring
awesome.
Ken Daniels. So check us out there. Yeah.
Very dope. And if you haven't heard, I'm bringing back the car flag movement. I bought mine literally an hour after Patty Kane hit the OT winner. We got to bring him back. Ryan, appreciate you so much, man.
We're going back to the early 2000s, man.
That's what it's all about.
Thanks, guys.
Shout out.
Appreciate you, brother.
Ryan, Hana, Wing Wheel Pod, man, they do great work. Great work over there. It's a great listen. Everyone should tune in, especially with what we've got cooking with the Red Wings. These guys are going to be pumping out great content, so make sure you tune in to the Wing Wheel Pod.